Welcome back to Social 20-1. We're up to lesson 12. I think that's going to be 12 from your perspective. After today's lesson on the USSR, we want you to be able to identify the rise of totalitarianism in the USSR. I want you to describe Stalin's policies and connect them to communism, connect them to Machiavelli, and connect them to a variety of techniques associated with dictators to both seize and then later maintain power. The outcomes are in purple, key information is in green as always. We have an assignment. First assignment is to contrast fascism and communism. We're going to get you to go ahead and look at these links. Here's the main difference. Both fascism and communism in the 20th century are seen as extreme ideologies, extreme sets of beliefs and values, extreme world visions. Communism is seen as a progressive ideology. It is seen as progressive because it is looking to establish something new, something that hadn't been attempted before. Whereas fascism was seen as a reactionary ideology. Leaders like Mussolini of Italy were talking about trying to reclaim, recreate the glory of their past, in their case, the Roman Empire. Another way to distinguish between fascism and communism is what type of society are they attempting to create? At least in theory, fascism is attempting to create a society that is built around the observation that not everyone's equal. Fascism creates a hierarchy. And fascism, within that hierarchy, there's an ethnic component, an ethnic national component. So, from the German fascist perspective, the Nazis, they saw the world from a racial perspective, and there were some races, the Slavic people, the Jewish people, that they saw as lesser people. And then they saw others at the top of the hierarchy, and obviously they're going to put themselves, the Germanic people. Their view of the world under social Darwinistic, natural selection lenses allowed them to justify genocide against lesser peoples. So fascism is about inequality. It's about submission and obedience to those better than you. Communism, in theory, is meant to be about equality. That the goal of communism in the end is an elimination of differences. The ultimate goal of communism is a classlessness, a classless society, where everyone works as hard as they can to benefit each other. So, the main difference between fascism and communism is the type of society they're attempting to create. Communism is creating a society in the future where everyone will be equal. Fascism is going to highlight the inequality among us. So that's outcome. Well, I don't see it up there now. That's a contrast of communism and fascism. They do have lots in common, though. Both totalitarian states of Stalin and Hitler attempt to embrace the following quote from Mussolini: "Everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state." But contrasting the two, we would have to make it clear that Stalin was more of a totalitarian than Hitler, because Stalin had more control of his people. Stalin had similar political control of Hitler, but there's more economic control as well in Stalin's USSR than you'd see in Hitler's Germany. So, if pressed to describe which of the two is more absolute totalitarian, Stalin's Soviet Union would be the example. Here's a Prezi that you could skim for a timeline of the Soviet Union during these events. This Prezi we'll also see next year in Social 30. There's going to be a whole section here about how communism comes to the Soviet Union. It's going to talk about the end of the age of the czars. It's going to talk about the role of Lenin and the Russian Revolution. But for the sake of this course, we're going to be focusing mostly on Stalin. When we look at Stalin, we really want to consider two things. How did Stalin's policies benefit the Soviet Union? And how did Stalin's policies end up hurting the Soviet Union? So as you go through these slides, you're going to see a summary of both of those points. That's an excellent resource to look at. Skim the following, right? Let's put Stalin in perspective. So Stalin is going to attempt to recreate the Soviet Union here, or maybe not even recreate. He's going to attempt to create something new in the sense of he makes this observation that we, the Soviet people, are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries. When he says advanced countries, he's talking about Germany and France and Britain and America and even Japan. And he knows that these are his rivals, that they're potential economic but also military rivals. And he understands that because they're 50 or 100 years behind, we must make good. We must make up this gap, this lag in 10 years, or we will be crushed. So he has this almost like prophecy that war is coming. He makes this statement at the end of the 1920s, and he's absolutely correct. War is coming about a decade later. And this observation is going to be, the linchpin of his policies. So he's going to rapidly centralize the economy. And included in that is taking the private plots of kulak farm territory in the Ukraine and making it national or public property. And in the resulting struggle, the 6 million kulaks, Ukrainian kulaks, will die. He's going to attempt to transform the lives of the Kazakh Kurdish people, and a quarter of them will die in that confusion. He's going to rapidly industrialize and modernize his state, but at a great cost. And this is the Machiavellian part. Machiavelli is remembered for writing some advice in a work called The Prince. And it's a letter saying, to a young prince, these are the things you must consider. It's better to be feared than loved. But ultimately, there's one other main idea of Machiavelli that kind of sticks to today, that the ends justify the means. And for Stalin, the ends is the survival of the Soviet Union. Nothing's more important. The means are therefore justifiable. So even if there's going to be blood on his hands, if we have to purge 1 million people, if we have to nationalize property and starve 6 million people, in the end it's going to save a country of the Soviet Union. It's going to save more than 100 million people. So that's the Machiavellian idea, that the ends justify the means. The ends, the survival, the long-term survival of our nation, more important than some pretty serious suffering to make sure we can survive. In order to survive, we must industrialize. In order to industrialize, the state must seize assets that we can use to transform our economy. We also have another Prezi, because apparently I love Prezis, about techniques of dictators. So you can take a look at this Prezi, go here, and go through it. It begins by defining what a dictator is from an ancient Roman sense. That's always good because it might be confusing as to why might somebody like a dictatorship? What's the attraction there? So read over what a dictatorship is, where the idea comes from in ancient Rome, and how there might be time when a dictatorship is for the benefit of the people. But then it's going to talk about these modern dictators, Hitler and Stalin, and their common techniques. So I want you to take note of, what is scapegoating? What is indoctrination and propaganda and force and terror and secret police and controlled participation and mass pageantry and cult of the leader. Take note of the techniques of dictatorship described in this Prezi. The techniques of dictatorship often appear on multiple choice questions. We'll have some quizzes on it as well. And you're definitely going to see this stuff again in 30. Then there's another Prezi, because I used to make a lot of Prezis, because that's what we did 10, 15 years ago when we first started teaching this new curriculum. So here it's going to talk a little bit more about what dictators are. It's going to define them, so much like that last one, going to give you some examples. So man, this really looks like the exact same Prezi, doesn't it? I think this is the exact same Prezi. So I don't know why we have both listed there. Huh. One is called the techniques of dictatorship. The other one is just called dictatorships. Let's just do this like it never happened. Here we have the idea of doctoring historical photographs to rewrite history, to elevate your status, or to, in this case, purge someone else from the party and the national history. So when Stalin's trying to elevate his status, he also has rivals, people that he's competing with for power within the party in the Soviet Union. And he's literally going to have photographs doctored to have them eliminated. So, Photoshop didn't exist, but they still had creative ways to do it. So what would this man have been able to accomplish with Photoshop? Makes us think about what people are doing now. I really need you to watch this video, Life Under Stalin, as well. And as you watch it, your focus should be, how is he changing the Soviet Union economically, politically, and to a lesser extent, socially. I'm just going to check to make sure that, yes, the link is still there. YouTube takes those links down very, very regularly, and then they pop back up. Here's a cartoon that celebrates his cult of leader. His work and his teachings is why we are great. That's why he's drawn as, this giant of a man to show the impact he has on the lives of the Soviet people. Here he is seen as like a father of the nation. Here you have a cartoon very critical of the common ground between Hitler and Stalin, and that's the fact that they do have a lot of blood on their hands. They both have purges. Hitler had the night-long knives. Stalin has his great terror as well. So that's it. That's the main part of today's lesson. There's additional stuff if you want to learn more about the end of communism. And here's a set of sources that you could take a look at to see how you might get tested on this. So it's a great set of sources, actually. It's focusing on the time of Stalin and the show trials. Then it looks at the fall of the Soviet Union. How do we go from this to that? And then it looks at the middle ground, the time in between those two, when the Soviets were engaged in an ideological Cold War with the West. So yeah, that's it. The main things to do today would be to watch that Life Under Stalin BBC video right here. That's one of the main things to do. That's why it's shown in green and red. Red is a task, green is something important. It's also important to take a look at the techniques of dictatorship and note those as well, please. And yes, you can look at that other Prezi and take note of the key events in the Soviet Union and of Stalin's policies. I hope you enjoy the lesson.